Do you want me?
Hey everyone, thank you guys for joining us for this session and for if you're joining us for the full day for our behavioral health learning event. My name is Kelsey Woody. I'm the event and meeting manager for the National Indian Health Board, and I'm the moderator for this session today. I want to go through a few quick housekeeping notes for today, just to keep in mind, and some of them pertains to the CEU credits too. So let me go through those. So just a reminder that the session is an hour long. Please be aware that the session is being recorded. I'm not sure at this moment if those will be shared beyond this. I'm sure they will on NIHP's YouTube. All of you guys are muted, but toward the end, Sade will have some time for Q&A. At that time, you guys can unmute yourself and ask questions. Otherwise, if you have questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat box. And at the end, I can go ahead and go down the list with Sade. And for the CEU credits, the quick housekeeping note that I have is you should have been provided, that's how you guys all entered the room, you should have been provided with the list of sessions. There's a little sign-in link, you click that to get here. The important thing is when the session is over, that you go back to that grid of links and sign out. You have to do that sign out portion. You have to click the link and do the quick little 5 questions, 6 questions that it asks for you to get your CEU credits. That's the most important piece. And I'll remind you at the end, if you can't find that grid from that email, I'll also post the link at the end in the chat box so that way you guys can just click that. I'll run through that again at the end just to make sure that everybody has that down, but that sign in, sign out portion is the most important for your CEU credits. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop talking and I'll let Sade, Heart of the Hawk is our presenter today, presenting on culturally resonant suicide safer care for Two-Spirit people. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Good morning, relatives. My name is Heart of the Hawk. I am Mi'kmaq First Nation from a small reserve in Nova Scotia, Canada. I am the tribal lead for the Zero Suicide Institute, and I would like to start this morning in a good way, as we always do. I want to say, Walaliok, thank you all for coming today. I was sharing with our moderator that folks usually come to these presentations, especially around these topics, for a couple different reasons. One of them is to be validated and to seek, to find representation in the work that we're doing. So I see you. Thank you for being here. Walaliok for being here today. I don't know if you can see, I'm trying to share my virtual sage with you. But I'd like to start with acknowledging the lands on which you all are presently. And I see there's folks from Alaska. It's really nice for me to see where you're all from. So if you could put that in the chat, you know, as I'm going through, I can take a look at that. But thank you for being here. We acknowledge the ancestors of the land on which you are presently. I'd like to acknowledge my own, the Mi'kmaqs from the maritime provinces of Canada, what's now known as Canada, and New Brunswick, and the state of Maine as well. I'd also want to acknowledge the ancestors of the land on which my home sits, and that's the Quinnipiac Nation, now known as North Haven, Connecticut, and the surrounding areas. I want to start with a prayer. And this prayer was actually written in Mi'kmaq, but it was translated into English. So I'd like to share this with you to start off in a good way this morning. Creator, thank you for this day you've given us. Thank you for allowing us to gather here today. And we ask you to enter where we are so that your teachings will work in us. We ask for wisdom so that we will know what is good in this world. We ask for love so we can spread your love everywhere. We ask for respect so that we will know that everyone comes from one place, and that's from you. We ask for bravery so that we will not be afraid to do your work here. We ask for honesty so that no one will lie or harm any one of us. We ask for humility so that no one will be superior to another. And Creator, we ask for truth so that we will see you in everything we do on this day with clean hearts and clean spirits. Wilalia for allowing me to open this presentation. We have some objectives today, and I hope that we're going to be able to share them with you. And that's to examine the history and challenges that are experienced by our Two-Spirit people in order to provide good care to them in behavioral health and in suicide prevention, especially. To employ suicide safer care through screening, assessment, and safety planning that's resonant with Two-Spirit people. What do you need to know about us in order to provide that care and to really provide assessment and planning for suicide safer care that's resonant with us, and apply strategies for ensuring safety, especially for our Two-Spirit youth, including those affected by bullying. So I want to tell you about who I am, and you notice that they didn't do a bio for me, and I don't like to have a bio read because it's long and boring and it's irrelevant. But I am a citizen of the Mi'kmaq First Nation in Nova Scotia, Canada. I'm a Two-Spirit elder and medicine keeper of the New England States Two-Spirit Society, brand new organization founded with one of the participants in this room. And I see you, Scott. And I'm on my 74th rotation around grandfather's son. I'm also a first generation survivor of one of the more brutal residential schools, was what we called them, on my side of Turtle Island, across that artificial border that we didn't create, called Shubenacadie. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. I have 3 great-grandchildren so far. I'm a person in long-term recovery from a pretty serious addiction. I have over 51 years in recovery, and I'm also a person in long-term recovery from what is known in the field as a severe mental health challenge. I'm a multiple suicide attempt survivor, a clinician loss survivor, and a family loss survivor. And I've been in the fields of behavioral health in addictions care and in mental health care for over 51 years. All of these things I'm telling you, I am not unique. I can tell you that I sat in a healing lodge on the Maliseet, one of the Maliseet reservations and reserves in New Brunswick, Canada. And I heard my story around the circle 15 times. So I'm not unique. These things are not unique. I want to also acknowledge all of the lives that have so impacted our people in the last few months. The 215 babies that were found in British Columbia are only some of the ones that have been found. There are others. Right, not too far from me in the state of Pennsylvania is the prototype of the residential schools on which all of the rest of the horrific treatment of Indigenous people, the genocidal attempt of removing our children from their kinship, from their language, from their ceremony, from their families, in order to kill the Indian to save the man. Almost every one of those so-called schools had cemeteries, and in some of them, there are unmarked graves, including that first one, the Carlisle Indian Residential School in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So we want to acknowledge those babies and realize that every single child matters. And this is why I'm still in the field at my age, because our children are losing their lives, and especially our Two-Spirit children. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. This is going to be review for some of you, but maybe not for all of you. Some of you may not know who we are. Some of you may be just experiencing the term two-spirit for the first time. Some of you are two-spirit. So again, I see you and thank you for being here. Walalio, for being here, for sharing and for being able to spiritually be part of this work. So we're going to talk about Indigenous history, being real history. I just told you about the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, but there is nothing that contributed to the discrimination faced by us today that's more powerful than the residential school, boarding school era. So what we face today in many of our nations, especially our more acculturated nations, has roots in the genocidal tactic of the boarding schools. This is a picture that's kind of, it's iconic when we're talking about the residential school era, the boarding school era. This is a picture of the children of the Carlisle Indian Residential School. And most of you know, and some of you may not, that many of the children who were taken from their families and taken from their tribes and their nations were between the ages of 3 and 6 when they first got taken. In Canada, the Indian agents would come and they would, in the United States, it was the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And it's really paradoxical that Deb Haaland is now launching an investigation of all of the so-called schools down here on this side of Turtle Island to ensure that all of the children whose lives were taken return home to their people. But these are the children of the Carlisle Indian Residential School, the prototype for all of the boarding schools and the residential schools on Turtle Island. And I don't see any of those children with a smile on their faces. I also want to pay tribute to the Shubenacadie, the children of the Shubenacadie Indian Residential School. It looks like something from a horror film, and it certainly was. This is the one my mother was incarcerated in from the ages of 6 to 16. It was called a school. However, she left that place not knowing how to read and write. She knew how to press a shirt and she knew how to wash clothes, and that's basically what she learned. And she learned how to hate herself and how to hate her Indigenous blood and the ceremonies and the language and all of the things that made her a Mi'kmaq. She learned how to do that. So let's talk a little bit about what Two-Spirit is. Now, for some of you, as I said, this is going to be a review. But for others, this may be the first time that you're encountering this. So please just go along with me. The term Two-Spirit, and I've had challenges with this with others, it really doesn't make sense unless it's contextualized in a Native framework, in a First Nations framework. Why? Because it's a traditional term that was actually gathered by consensus in a 1990 meeting in Winnipeg, Canada, of what was then known as LGBT Natives. We knew that we didn't fit that particular term. We didn't fit those boxes. We didn't fit what those boxes meant and the restriction of those boxes. And the term Two-Spirit, and there are differences between LGBT Natives and Two-Spirit Natives. The Two-Spirit people, we understand that we have a spiritual responsibility to our people. We are attempting to learn our languages again. We are the keepers of ceremony, the keepers of medicine. We're trying to recreate the traditional roles our Two-Spirit ancestors held way back before contact. And we will talk about that in a minute. But we want you to know that the terms LGBT natives and Two-Spirit natives, they're really not interchangeable. And again, Two-Spirit roles, they're aligned with the sacred roles of the ancestors, the ones that we used to have, the keepers of ceremony, the namers of children, the protectors of the tribe in general. Some of our people were really known as very, very powerful warriors. I had one friend who was from the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa, Chippewa, tell me that she had talked to her elders about the presence of Two-Spirit people in the tribe historically. And he's like, oh yes, Two-Spirit people were definitely part of our people. However, they didn't live in the village, in the village proper. They used to live on the outskirts of it. And to her, that said that we weren't allowed to live in the village. However, I knew better because especially I know a lot about the Anishinaabe and the Ojibwe people and Two-Spirit people in general. And they were really fierce protectors of the village. So they wanted to live on the outskirts of the village because they really were the village's security system, basically. Very, very powerful warriors. Those were some of the traditional and sacred roles that our people held. And we were held in esteem. But we were also feared because many folks believed that we had really, really strong medicine. A lot of the tribes believed that we had one foot in the spirit world and one in the physical, and therefore could mediate between the genders. We could see things with what is now known as third eye that others could not. And we were often seen as counselors. If the tribal council, if the elders couldn't solve a problem, they would take it to the Two-Spirit people. And we were also seen as the protectors of children, which is really resonant with me because this is why I'm so passionate about the work that I do around suicide prevention for our Two-Spirit children today. We mediated between genders, and oftentimes when there was a negotiation between tribes, either for peace or war, the tribes would bring us with them because they believed that we could see things that others could not. We were also seen as the namers of children, and those of you who are Indigenous in this room will know how powerful it is to, and how important it is to give a child a name that they can live up to. And those names have power. And so this is one of the reasons why in suicide prevention, especially, why many of our tribes, when you're working with our tribes around suicide prevention, you can't say the word suicide. In my language, in Mi'kmaq, there is no word for suicide. And in many tribal languages, and I've worked with tribes all over Turtle Island, there is no word for suicide. And there's a taboo around talking about it anyway, because of that concept of naming and how powerful naming is. If you say something, if you speak it out loud, it brings it to you and it gives you life, gives it life. So we have to be very careful about the way we articulate the work that we're doing with certain tribes because of that concept of naming. You don't want to be bringing that kind of energy. Many of our tribes who are doing zero suicide have renamed it something that's life promotion instead of suicide prevention. And this is how we do suicide prevention in Indian country with many of our tribes. Almost every tribe had a name for us. Think about the tribes that we have now, the federally recognized, the state recognized, the villages up in Alaska. Almost everyone had a name for us. And it usually had something to do with transformation or change, turning into, being transformed into, changing into. And it was a positive positive name and not something derogatory. I recently did a 2-hour talk, and I didn't have any slides at all, for the state of Kansas, who really understand that every single prevention effort that they have is not necessarily geared toward everyone. And I was talking about the need for us to have language that is resonant with the people we're serving. But it really is important for us to know that every single one of us, there's no such thing as native culture. There's no such thing as native culture. There are native cultures. So you think about the federally recognized tribes, the state recognized tribes, the villages, and all of the tribes that, because of all of the efforts at eradication of indigenous people that used to be and are no more, every single one of them had a name for our people, and it had something to do with transformation, and it was positive. And one of the participants in the workshop that I did, of this 2-hour talk I did to open up their series around culturally appropriate care for those who are people of color in the state of Kansas, especially indigenous people, was talking about how the same holds true in many of the countries, in especially in West Africa, where a lot of enslaved people of ancestors of enslaved Africans came from, and how there was no negative term. It was always about gatekeepers or people who stood at the gate, again, having one foot in the spirit world and one in the physical. A very, very, very powerful place to be, and one that was held in high esteem by the tribes. So if I had a child in my tribe and there was evidence that that child had a propensity, it might have been a male-bodied child, that child had a propensity for feminine work, wanted to learn how to cook, wanted to learn how to weave, wanted to learn how to do beadwork and how to sew, and was very much interested in feminine tribal affairs. Instead of being the parents throwing up their hands and saying, oh, we'll never have grandchildren. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is a sin. There was a big celebration. There was a feast, because here Creator had sent this child as a special gift to the tribe, to mediate between the genders, to hold ceremony and keep ceremony, to have that one foot in the spirit world and one in the physical, and to bless the tribe. Many people still acknowledge us as people of medicine, and many of us, not coincidentally, are in roles that our ancestors held. My degrees are in clinical psychology. I'm ABD and a PhD in clinical psychology, healing role. Many of us are working in this field of behavioral health. Many of us are still doing things of medicine, carrying on traditional roles that our two-spirit ancestors once held. Now I'm going to share the story of this picture with you. This is a buffalo dancer. This is a buffalo sun dancer up in Canada, in Ottawa. Does sun dance up in Ottawa. And the story of this sun dancer is especially powerful for those of us doing work in suicide prevention, because, and not all of us, again, remember, there's no such thing as native cultures, a culture, there's native cultures. My particular culture, oh yes, Ontario, so you may know this person. My particular culture says that if someone ends their own life, that they can't find the walk to Creator, that they get lost on the path to the walk to Creator. Now, not all tribes believe that. The Lakota don't. The Lakota say, if your life ends, you automatically walk to Creator. Some of our tribes do not feel that, or do not believe that. So A couple years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I got a text from one of my young relatives, one of my young two-spirit relatives up in Canada. They are Cree, no, Anishinaabe and Mi'kmaq. So mom is Mi'kmaq, dad is Anishinaabe, and they lived on one of the reserves up there in Canada. Asked me if I could get a buffalo skull for them. And I'm like, yes, I can get a buffalo skull for you. And I know, our sacred animal is not the buffalo up there, it's the moose. So I said, well, I can get a buffalo skull for you. And I found a buffalo skull and I sent it up to Canada. It costs more to send it up there than it costs for the skull. But then they shared with me what they needed the buffalo skull for. They were given the role by the elder for the Sundance of going to the place where the spirits of the people who have ended their lives by suicide, where they reside, and bringing them, putting them on that path and bringing them to Creator. This hair stood up on my end of my arm when I read that. But that's what this young buffalo dancer does, is goes out into the spirit world with this buffalo medicine, and retrieves the soul, the spirits of those who have ended their own lives. And the first one, whose name was put on a red ribbon on and tied to that buffalo skull, was my brother Gabe Pictou. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share not only this picture of this very powerful two-spirit person who was gifted this medicine and actually uses it to heal our people and to bring closure to those left behind, but also to tell the story. So a lot of us go into the helping professions: social work, medicine, psychology, education, tribal law, politics. We're learning our languages and reclaiming our traditional places and ceremonies and advocating for an end to the loss of our two-spirit people to suicide, especially our young people. I was sharing with our moderator, no, I was sharing prior to this meeting, as a matter of fact, how our rates of suicide are flipped uh, with the dominant cultures. The dominant culture, people my age are really seen as at high risk for ending our lives, but in traditional, in native ways, we're seen as the wisdom keepers and the elders and the people to be protected. I can't go to a powwow or a ceremony where I'm not waited on. I don't, I'm fully able, and I'm a dancer, and I love to dance. But the young traditional Indigenous people will always take care of me, will always make certain that I'm fed and that I have a place in the front. And so our suicide rates go way down. The older we get, the more protective factors are surrounding us, and that's our people. So here's some of the roles, and I think that we're revitalizing in our two-spirit communities. And the first two-spirit advocacy group, focus group, was created in 1975 in San Francisco. That was the Gay American Indians, and they're still operational. They're still operational from 1975. There's two-spirit societies and alliances all over Turtle Island. And if you don't know how to access, and we're going to talk about how you access information, all you need to do is look on the internet, and the two-spirit societies and alliances are listed there. We're included in diversity celebrations, other events such as this, uh, major conferences and presentations like today's. I was sharing a story about the last in-person NIHB conference we had. I was doing this workshop, and the time came for me to start, and there was like 2 people in the room, and I'm like, nobody's gonna come. And then all of a sudden people started flooding in, and people ended up sitting on the floor. So there's more and more um, hunger to get this information, to find out about, because you're treating 2-spirit people in your services, they may not just be out to you. And so we're going to talk about how you can help that. We have coming in ceremonies, on and off reservations and reserves, and I'll talk about the difference between coming in and coming out. And national and international 2-spirit gatherings held all over Turtle Island. We haven't had a in-person one for a while, but I think that that's going to start happening this summer, and I'm very, very happy about that. This is a buffalo skull that I painted, and I actually saw this design or something like it at the Saginaw Chippewa Museum in Michigan, and I thought it was very beautiful with the medicine colors. And I bought this skull, and I talked to her. I believe she was female, and I talked to her, and I sang to her as I painted her, and I didn't know what was going to happen to her. I just knew I needed to do this, and you'll see her a little bit later, but I wanted to show you this skull that I painted. And it did go to the Southwest 2-Spirit Society, and is the representation of their 2-Spirit Society. And you'll see her a little bit later on. And I told you I was going to talk to you about the difference between coming out and coming in. So usually a person from the dominant culture um, will want to declare their independent identity. So an LGBT person builds up their courage and sometimes anticipates conflict, not always, and they announce their sexuality or gender identity or expression to a friend or family member, sometimes at the risk of being met with anger or violence or rejection or abandonment sometimes. However, Indigenous 2-Spirit folks come in. And that's really we understand our own relationship and value to our family, to our community, to our culture, to our history, and to the present day world. Coming in isn't a declaration or announcement. It's simply presenting yourself authentically and being fully present as an Aboriginal person who understands that we have a spiritual responsibility to our people and to our ancestors. And we try to live that spiritual responsibility in everything we do. And again, that's the difference between an LGBT native who may not really care about participating in ceremony or learning language or um, being a person of medicine and following the ways of the ancestors. And that's okay too. But those of us 2-Spirit people understand our spiritual responsibility to our ancestors and to our people in general. Here you see this skull, and it's being held by Alma Rosa, who is one of the originators of the 2-Spirit people, the 2-Spirit Society of the Southwest. This is a picture of us at the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice in April of 2018. We came from all corners of Turtle Island, and that wasn't all of us. It was just the people who came the night before the Gathering of Nations. And I want to share that story with you because it's a story not only of challenge, but it's also a story of triumph. In April of 2018, we did gather there in Albuquerque at the Gathering of Nations, and many of you in this room probably were at one time or another the Gathering of Nations. It's in an auditorium in Albuquerque that holds 20,000 people. The year that the 2018 that I participated, There were 5,700 dancers who registered, including myself. Gathering of Nations also has a category beyond Golden Age, the category many of us are used to dancing in. There's a category above that called Elders. You had to be 70 and over to dance in that category, and that's the category I registered in. And I will tell you that it was something that I can't even put into words. Going into the circle with 13 other elders over 70 and having the arena director make everybody stand up. I went into the circle in tears. Now, I did not win in my category because you Southern women, you've got all the bling and the beauty in your regalia. I believe my regalia is beautiful, but it's nothing compared to the Southern women who really understand how to bling up a regalia. And so I just wanted to dance, and I did, and it was a beautiful thing. That night at the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, we got together, we made a plan for grand entry the next day. There's 2 grand entries in Gathering of Nations, and we decided we were going to do the 7 p.m. Gathering of Nations grand entry. We decided where we were going to meet. We were going to set up a staging area. We were going to bring our medicines, and we were going to smudge and pray. And we set our time and we set our place, and that's where we met the next evening. We went in as a group. Our Miss International Two-Spirit, lovely young person from the San Carlos Apache, went in with the other royalty. If you've ever been to Gathering of Nations, you know that the law is men on one side and women on the other. And we tried to go in together. And we tried to go in with the Eagle staff of the Southwest Two-Spirit Society, because that was our host Two-Spirit Society. And we were going to honor their Eagle staff, representing Two-Spirit people all over Turtle Island. And the arena director stopped us and said, only men on this side, women on the other side, you've got to go on the other side. And being that the old folks go in the front, I kept saying to him, but we're the Two-Spirit people, we need to go in together. And he kept saying, men on one side, women on the other. He wasn't listening to me. And we said this about 4 times, and he said, and the only Eagle staff in this circle is the one for Gathering of Nations. And we were adamant. We said, we're the Two-Spirit people. We need to go in together. Finally, he threw up his hands and he walked off. And here comes another arena director. And he said, oh, just go in behind the men. And that's what we did. We went in behind the men. We were the last into the circle for grand entry for Gathering of Nations. And we went in with the Eagle staff, and we went in together. This was very emotional. It was very heart-wrenching, and we felt discriminated against it because there was very little to no understanding of who we are as sacred people. After we all went home, the folks from the Southwest Two-Spirit Society met with the powwow committee and told them about how we were treated. The powwow committee promised education for the staff the following year and invited us back. Sadly, I was doing a presentation like this during that Gathering of Nations when the rest of them went back. And not only did we have a place of honor in the Gathering of Nations, we came in right behind the main Eagle staff, right behind the warriors who were carrying and dancing in this beautiful Eagle staff. We came in with the Southwest Two-Spirit Society Eagle staff and with another medicine staff, and right behind the main Eagle staff. One of our lovely Two-Spirit people from the Southwest Two-Spirit Society at the dinner we had that night announced her candidacy for president of the Diné Nation. She was the very first Two-Spirit person and the very first trans-identified Two-Spirit person to ever run for president of the Diné Nation, the Navajo Nation. We are so proud of our Trudy Jackson and what she represents to Two-Spirit people. Again, she's not the only person who has run, and there are several on my side of Turtle Island who are chiefs or leaders in their tribe. So she kind of made history that evening at the Gathering of Nations dinner we had afterwards. When we were trying to console ourselves, she told us first before she let it be known that she was filing for to run for president, and we are very, very, very proud of her. I want to talk about some fiction, some falsehoods around us, and then I'm going to tell you the facts. So one of the points of fiction, and I hear this all the time, Two-Spirit and LGBT Native youth who in their own lives have gender dysphoria or are experiencing difficulty with their own sexual orientation. We hear this all the time. That's the reason why they end their lives. All Two-Spirit people are trans-identified or genderqueer. We hear that as well. Competent healthcare is widely available for Two-Spirit and LGBT Natives. One of the fiction things we hear. And the residential or boarding school era, which removed our children from their tribes, villages, homelands, kinship, and families, didn't impact Two-Spirit children any more than it did other Indigenous children. Yes, we heard about in the chat, you'll see some messages. We just heard about 200 more children, and believe me, the ancestors are making it known. The ancestors are making it known. But the facts, the actual facts are many Two-Spirit and LGBT Native children who end their own lives do so because they've been bullied. They lack support from their own tribes and their families, and because they feel helpless and unsafe, that they're unwanted. And if you're familiar with suicide prevention and Thomas Joyner's theory of interpersonal relationship to suicidality, thwarted belongingness, not feeling like you belong anywhere, the feeling of being a burden on your family, on your community, and then the ability to end your life or the crossroads where that loss happens. And Two-Spirit children especially feel that, many feel, it depends on the tribe, it depends on the nation, it depends on how acculturated the nation is, that they don't belong, and they're told they don't belong. If there's no Two-Spirit society or alliance or a place where children can be safe and feel safe, and where they can feel like there's arms wrapped around them, it's a very dangerous place to be. Two-Spirit people are trans-identified. They're gender variant, they're gender non-conforming, they're asexual, they're same gender loving, they're cisgender, they're all of those and none of those. Those kinds of boxes are not resonant with our people in general. And so certainly not for Two-Spirit people. So we're all of those things. And we don't identify, some of us don't identify with any of them. Some do, but not all of us do. I love the idea that the National Indian Health Board in their in-person conference, they didn't do it this time, but in their in-person conference, they have, when they ask for gender, they say male, female, Two-Spirit, and I love that, the attention to that. It feels really good. Rarely is there competent healthcare available for Two-Spirit people or LGBT Natives in general. Rarely. There are some anecdotal things that I get from my relatives all over Turtle Island about some of the IHS hospitals having competent staff and really understanding. And I know I've done some work for IHS on Two-Spirit people, but that's not across the board. And I hear some horror stories from our relatives around, there was one that someone went in for a toothache, and they made them, it happened to be a Two-Spirit trans-identified person, and they made them disrobe. For what? For a toothache? There's something wrong with that. Now, the residential boarding school era, that was fiction that I told you before. It was doubly hard on those Two-Spirit children who were severely punished when they were identified. It was usually because of their clothing. If my auntie, I have a 94-year-old auntie who's a survivor of Shubenacadie up in Nova Scotia. She was in the boarding school with my mother, and she talked about a little child, two little children in the village, in the reserve where she was living. And she said she didn't, the elders always told the other kids that these two children had special jobs, and every time there was a ceremony they were always right close to the elders, and but they only knew, they knew these children as little girls. They played with them, they wore the same clothes, and when they got taken to Shubenacadie, they were taken into a room where there were tubs, wooden tubs with cold water and Lysol, because they believed that the children were dirty, and they made them completely disrobe. And then when this little girl disrobed, they found the little girl had a penis, and the nuns went crazy and they called the priest. And the next thing my auntie said, she heard the little child screaming and was being beaten. She heard the beating, and that didn't stop. That continued on. And then the priests and nuns told the other little children to do the same thing, and to push these children around, and to call them names and use harsh words with them. So the colonization, the brainwashing of our people, and the removal of the sacred nature of Two-Spirit people has its roots in the residential and boarding school era. And I really have to be intentional about when I work with tribes that are acculturated, realizing where the blame really needs to lie, and that's in those so-called schools. What I wish my clinician knew about me when working with me, and I'm going to have to go through this really quickly. So I want to give you some tips about working with us, and Two-Spirit people in general, and youth in particular. If a young person trusts you enough to tell you who they are, please honor and believe that. Just honor them and believe that. Be extremely attentive to pronouns, even if the presentation may seem to you that this child said that they are female and they don't look female. It doesn't matter. Be extremely attentive to the pronouns. It's not up to us to identify the person coming for services. They are who they say they are. Don't ask what are your preferred pronouns, because that assumes there's a choice. What are your pronouns? Ask and be very open about it. Just like, what do you want to be called? What are your pronouns? My pronouns are she, her, hers. Ask me, but don't ask what are your preferred pronouns. If you make a mistake, apologize, slow down, and be more deliberate. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's a process. Respectfully ask for assistance from others who are in the tribes you're working with identifying Two-Spirit elders in the tribe, to consult with them around appropriate care. If the tribe is less traditional, do a search, as I said, for the Two-Spirit Society or Alliance nearest you. There's organizations like We Are Native. They do a phenomenal job. Ask them for advice and materials. They have a ton of stuff to give away. Pamphlets in your waiting room, posters on your wall, focusing on Two-Spirit people. Tell them that they're going to be safe there and that they're welcome. Check your intake forms and other paperwork. Do you use binary gender markers? Make sure that that's changed. Is there room to talk about domestic partnerships rather than just married, single, and divorced? That's less of an issue now because of the ability to marry, but many tribes still have prohibitions in that. So not everyone who is two-spirit and partnered can marry, especially if they want to stay with their tribe. Whether you think you work with us or not, you probably do. Not all of us have completed our coming in process. But once we feel that we can be safe with you, we'll tell you who we are. With that in mind, there's many great YouTube videos and other information about the sacredness of our people and how we were honored once in our tribes, villages, and community. Learn a little bit about us, but make sure what you watch or read comes from us and not from somebody studying us, because oftentimes it's created from a very different lens than ours. And check your assessments and screening tools for any language that could be re-traumatizing to Indigenous people. We're returning to a more normal way of living. We're in the process of it, but once we've really returned, consider having a two-spirit talking circle with elders and allies and let the community know that it's happening. Let the community know that your services are safe for our people, but most of all, be aware of your own biases. We all have them. And I will tell you, re-traumatization of people who come for services is real. And as a person in long-term recovery, I can tell you that we're very, very observant. We know, I can tell you when someone is not accepting the fact that I am who I am, and I will always come to you as my real self. And at my age, I really don't care if you accept me or not. You know, that's how we get when we get to be elder status in our tribes. It really, that what you feel is your challenge and not really mine. If you have difficulty moving beyond your biases, either get supervision or remove yourself from working with us. And remember, it's not about you, it's about us. It's about the children, especially, who are coming to you and saying, I need help. I feel like ending my life. Decolonization, I love this term, is simply the intentional, reflective, and communal self-examinations undertaken by us and other formerly colonized people in service to an action that finds continuity within the traditional, that's pre-colonial, pre-contact, past, even as it charts a purposeful, distinctive, and self-determined post-colonial future. We need to reach back into the root system because a tree grows from the roots. And if we want a strong people, we need to reach back into that root system, the way of the ancestors. We're busy recreating the roles held traditionally by our two-spirit ancestors today. We're not all people of medicine in the narrow sense of the definition, but we are engaging in professions and in service that lifts our people up. We're chiefs, we're psychologists, we're doctors, lawyers, tribal court judges. I'm sure most of you saw smoke signal. This man right here is two-spirit. That's Thomas. And he actually was one of the keynote speakers at an IHB that I attended. We star in movies on and off Broadway. We write novels and plays and music, and we even win Amazing Race Canada. And that's my good friends and Dr. Makokis and his husband, and they won Amazing Race Canada. You can find lots of information on two-spirit people in best and promising practices for the implementation of zero suicide in Indian country. And I know that toolkit very, very well because I wrote it. And there's a big section on two-spirit people, lots of videos. And please do check it out. Now, and I know we have a very, very short time. Was there anything that in the chat that I missed? Because
I think we got everything in the chat, but yeah, sorry, you got everything in the chat. You're good to go.
Great. Great, great, great. Oh, Greg, I see Greg from Santee Sioux. Hey, Greg, and all of our relatives. It really, really is a pleasure to see you all in here. South Dakota, Oklahoma, California, Alaska, and of course, oh, Liz from Mohegan. All right. And then, of course, Scott, my partner in crime in the creation of nests. You know what happens in a nest. Um, the young ones get nurtured and fed and protected. And that's what we're going to be creating here in the state of Connecticut for our two-spirit children. I really, Washington State, oh, so good. Michigan, all of my Anishinaabe folks, and Puerto Rico. Okay, all of the Tainos. Yes, 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 Arizona. It is so good to be with the relatives today, Minnesota, and actually having you listen to this, and please take these few words, and I know they came very, very, very fast. But do some more research, because this little hour isn't going to make you an expert in two-spirit people. It's just not. And we really want you to be spurred to do some more research, to get in touch with your local two-spirit society or alliance, and do some research, some more research, and you'll find that our people, our once honored people, we're returning to that circle. We're returning, and people are actually coming to the realization that, you know, we really need to get beyond what was taught us in the residential schools and in the boarding schools, and to really understand that you can't call yourself a traditional Indigenous person if there's not a space for your two-spirit kin. So Wilaliok, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate you. And as we leave together, um, moving on through the day and through your work, think about our two-spirit children, and how can you intervene? How can you stop someone, the loss of our life, our lives, our two-spirit babies' lives? Because I don't know about you, but as I continue on my journey and into my 70s, and walk on into my 70s, I can tell you that, you know, I'm not going to be here forever, and I shouldn't be here forever. And what happens to our ceremonies and our songs and our traditions if our children aren't there? So, Welaliuk, thank you everyone for the work that you do, and for being here today. For my two-spirit relatives, I see you. For those who came and with open hearts to learn, Welaliuk, thank you for the courage to be here, and thank you to Kelsey and National Indian Health Board for the honor of being asked. I was asked to do this presentation. It wasn't something I applied for. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to share these few words. Wilaliuk.
Thank you so much, Ade. Just as housekeeping, as we wrap things up, or as things are wrapped up, if you are, put it in the chat box, but if you are seeking CE credits for this presentation, you have to click the sign out link and do the little sign out process with that link for the CE credits. Also, ASU is the one processing those for us, and they let me know that it should take about three-ish weeks for those to be processed and the information to be sent back to you. But the most important thing is clicking the sign in link, which you did, you're here, clicking the sign out link, filling that out. And then also in the next about 5 minutes, I will be putting you all back in the waiting room. I don't know if you guys are staying for the next presentation, but you'll have to leave anyway. And then you have in the invitation email, you have a little time schedule for the next 3 sessions that are available, and you can choose from those. But I hope you guys enjoyed that presentation, and I will see you all later.